Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, several historic buildings, including parts of Cape Town University's library, are damaged before South African firefighters managed to contain a wildfire along Table Mountain. Also, more than 20,000 people fled the Mozambican town of Palma after it was captured by Islamist insurgents back in March. It was retaken by the army, but militants remain a threat, and locals' flight southwards continues. And Cameroonian authorities worry about pentecostal churches in which worshippers are being encouraged to flout social distancing measures as the country battles a second wave of coronavirus infections. But first, the historic library of the University of Cape Town and several other buildings in the South African city have been damaged by a wildfire that swept through the bush and forced the evacuation of several neighborhoods. After 24 hours, firefighters finally managed to rein in the blaze by Monday evening. Shirley Sitman tells us more.
Good morning, residents. I please urge you to evacuate from your houses.
Cape Town area residents faced a second day of emergency evacuations as flames over Table Mountain approached some residential areas. Strong winds made it particularly hard to contain the flames. They meant firefighters could not use their helicopters, usually crucial to put out the blaze on the hilltops and slopes. Still, they managed to contain much of the flames.
Once the fire is contained, and this can change, all depends on the weather, the windy conditions prevailing here in Cape Town.
On day 2 of these enormous fires, among the worst in the city's history, some have started assessing the damage. Historic buildings destroyed. South Africa's oldest windmill looks like this now that the flames around it have been put out. It's not just the buildings that have been damaged. Invaluable collections inside may be gone forever, like unique manuscripts kept in the university's library and its African Studies section.
Fire inspectors, UCT do have their own fire investigating team on scene, and I think that picture will get much clearer within the next 2 to 3 days.
Was the fire started accidentally or deliberately? The investigation is ongoing. One man has been arrested near Devil's Peak, and he allegedly confessed to starting one of the fires.
A Rwandan report on the 1994 genocide in the country has found that France bore significant responsibility for enabling the slaughter. Around 800,000 Tutsis and some Hutus opposed to the massacres were killed in just 100 days. The Muse report says that Paris collaborated with the extremist Hutu regime in power at the time. It goes further than France's Duclerc Commission that last month conceded that for the first time that Paris bore overwhelming responsibility for the killings, but was not complicit. Despite past diplomatic tensions, the Muse report has acknowledged that France has recently made moves towards transparency.
This is very important. If you have a common understanding of the past, it is easier to work together to build a better future between both countries.
Look now to News in Brief. At least 12 people were killed and dozens of homes destroyed in a fuel tanker fire in central Nigeria. Many people were also hurt after the tanker crashed and caught ablaze in Agatu in Benue State on Sunday. Chad's president's been re-elected for a 6th term in office with just under 80% of the vote. Provisional results through from the April the 11th election have extended Idris Deby's 30-year rule. The outcome is, as was widely expected, he's one of Africa's longest-serving leaders. Opposition figures had called for a boycott of polls after Deby's decision to run again led to protests. Namibia's High Court refused to give a gay couple travel documents to re-enter the country with twin daughters who were born to a surrogate in South Africa. Philip Lull, who's Namibian, and his Mexican husband have been trying to return home since their children were born a month ago. Judges refused to order the Home Office to issue travel certificates for the infants, saying that would be overreach. Authorities say that Lul must prove a genetic link to the children before they can get papers. Now, more than 20,000 people fled the Mozambican town of Palma after it was captured by Islamist insurgents back in March. It has since been retaken by the military, but the extremist threat and the flight southward continues. Many have headed to a town called Pemba, bringing with them the mental and physical scars of the brutal attack. Our team reports.
Pemba's stadium is packed full of displaced families. Many arrived by boat from Palma, even though soldiers had seized the town back from insurgents. Rumours of further extremist attacks led more people to flee in panic.
I didn't see the insurgents, but there was a lot of movement and agitation in all the surrounding villages. We were told that the attackers were getting very close to town, so we decided to leave.
Anfate could not go on living in fear. His 16-year-old son disappeared during fighting in March and hasn't been seen since. Anfate fled Palma with his wife and 3 remaining children. He hopes that his son will not be forced to join the insurgents. Survivors say children are kidnapped during every terrorist attack, both young girls and boys. This woman lost her 3-year-old nephew when the insurgents briefly took control of Palma.
My uncle was with his wife and another couple. His wife was carrying his son. They tried to hide, but the insurgents found them. They let them go, but they kept the baby.
More than 40% of those who have fled Palma are under 18. One organisation that helps feed the displaced expects their numbers to grow.
We do things locally. We don't just sit with our arms folded. The country cannot manage by itself. We will never be able to do enough. If the international community can help us, it will be welcome.
There are close to 1 million displaced people in the north. Attacks first started in 2017 and the region remains volatile.
Cameroonian authorities are worried about Pentecostal churches in which worshippers are being encouraged to flout social distancing measures. Their fears that the houses of worship are the sources of super spreader events as the country struggles with a second wave of infections. Our team reports.
Filled with spirit, a woman goes into trance while the pastor preaches. Worshippers gather for service at a revival church in Yaoundé. Those attending pay little attention to social distancing measures. They have been convinced that they are immune to COVID-19.
Nous sommes des chrétiens. Nous pensons à une chose qui est vraie, que c'est Jésus-Christ qui guérit. Nous pouvons prendre des médicaments. Nous pouvons prendre des cures, et des cures, et des cures, et des médicaments. Mais il y a une seule chose.
The congregation is passionate about Reverend Asila. He has been the lead pastor of this Pentecostal church for more than 3 years. Cameroon is currently battling a spike in coronavirus infections. Nevertheless, the pastor uses the same towel to touch and bless Christians. He acknowledges the risks.
Ce serait une hérésie de dire que ni moi qui suis homme de Dieu, ni les fidèles ne seront pas touchés par coronavirus. Personne n'est à l'abri de quoi que ce soit, mais c'est Dieu qui nous protège. Mes fidèles sont un peu plus protégés que les païens.
A false claim shared by many pastors. There are over 350 revival churches in the country. They continue to hold large religious gatherings in defiance of government's rules and regulations. The minister responsible for churches and religious groups has threatened to sanction these churches.
Lorsqu'un pasteur vous dit le Covid n'existe pas, lorsqu'un pasteur vient bluffer en disant qu'avec de l'eau bénite, par lui-même, il peut guérir le Covid. Je trouve que c'est extrêmement dangereux. Je crois que ces gens-là, ils ont leur place en prison et je leur donne, c'est le dernier avertissement que je leur donne.
Cameroon has just received its first doses of coronavirus vaccine. The second wave of COVID-19 in the country has been deadlier than the first.
And finally, in Sierra Leone, scientists are brewing over their future after having rediscovered a coffee species not seen in the wild in decades. Now, they're hoping that the Coffea stenophila beans will have flavour and use its heat tolerance to help secure the future of the coffee industry under threat from the dangers of climate change.
Climate change is front and centre for the coffee industry because we're seeing throughout the tropical coffee belt farmers being impacted by climate change, increasing temperatures, but also more erratic rainfall and increased drought.
What we want is a tree that's sort of relatively compact, that is drought resistant, that is climate tolerant, and can give us a good yield with good flavour attributes. And that's almost the holy grail that we've been looking for. And over previous years, other varieties have been explored, but none have had the potential quality in the cup that Stenophylla offered us at that first tasting.
We thought, if this coffee tastes okay, then that's great. What we didn't expect, and what we found, that it tasted fantastic. It had a good body, a good aroma, it had sweetness, it had complexity, all the things you want in a good cup of coffee.
So you heard it here, the coffee of the future. Well, that is, though, all we have time for Iron Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.